For me, having a little bit of experience in the climate space, I think what is really paramount right at this juncture is to see a lot less talk and a lot more action and a lot more commitment and a lot more money to trickle down. I think where we are right now, it's no longer people don't. I mean, we no longer have to say the climate crisis is real. I think we're all experiencing it across the world in different ways. From floods to earthquakes to tsunamis and name it, heat waves or whatever it is. We're all feeling the brunt of it. So the problem is not the fact that people don't know about the climate crisis, the fact that now how do we actually turn all of that into tangible actions. I think for me is to see member states actually not committing but demonstrating greater sense of urgency and that greater sense of action and responsibility. I think if they're able to integrate more young people in the ACS in the COP29, and I think that way we create that intergenerational collaboration. My name is Samuel. I'm a young Kenyan who is currently and actively working in the climate space. At the moment, I am serving as the executive director for Kenya ni Mimi, which is a social campaign working with young people, trying to put them at the heart of nation building. And also, I'm actively involved in the climate movement with a keen focus on climate education. I think it began during my campus days back at Strathmore University. I just found myself developing a keen interest on the SDGs, and I somehow grew fond of SDG 13 on climate change. And for me, it was just seeing how it's directly impacting different facets of life and how it's quite interconnected. And I was able to see the how integral our environment is to development and to be able to grow. So I was like, you know what, we need to, mobilize some people around this. We need to talk more about it as well. And I think also the fact that there's a lot of misconceptions around the climate conversation that people think it's about trees and but there's so much more to that as well. So I think during my campus days, I said I would plunge myself, and I think this is a space that God and just timing found me, and I've been enjoying it ever since. Africa Climate Summit, or as they call it, ACS, I think was the moment African member states got a chance to sit together and kind of discuss the climate agenda in an African way, prioritizing the issues because I believe for so long there have been numerous conversations around climate, but never has the African, community come together and said, let's discuss our problems in our own way and prioritize what is important for us. So I think the Africa Climate Summit was that moment for African member states to sit down and say, this is how we believe we should be growing and be able to tackle the climate crisis, and the fact that the conference was held on the continent as well was kind of also a moment for people to come together, celebrate our achievements, celebrate our innovations, and see the progression made so far and seeing where the gaps that we need to explore further. The Conference of Parties, which is COP, it's a yearly meeting that happens to among member states and other stakeholders. These are parties who have ratified the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this is a multilateral environmental agreement that covers the aspects of climate change and what member states must ought to do to keep the 1.5 degree goal alive, which means that how do we make sure that the global warming in our Earth, is reduced. And therefore, they meet yearly to discuss their progress, to discuss what needs to be done, to prioritize key issues, and to make, agreement and see how they, as a world, as a global community, how do we move together to solve the climate crisis? This meetings happen yearly. COP28 happened in Dubai last year, and this year it will be in Azerbaijan in Baku. And I think, the Africa Climate Summit, how it was able to link to COP28 was the fact that it gave a chance to the African community to kind of consolidate their insights and their position in a different way away from the regional climate weeks, which normally happen every year. However, this was a more unique and opportune moment for Africa to cement, its place and its ideas and what it hopes to achieve at COP28 in Dubai last year. So it allowed for people to talk about their problems, their challenges, and also propose what matters the most to them. And therefore, they were able to go to COP28 with a clear mind, with a clear focus of what their priorities are and what they hope to achieve. I think looking back at the Africa Climate Summit that was held in Nairobi, I think one of the major highlights, from the member state side was the Nairobi Leaders Declaration, which outline, a clear, pathway for how Africa should develop. utilizing its green minerals, utilizing its own resources, and kind of building resilience from within, and not necessarily relying on, Western influence or other members or other stakeholders. I think it was a really African-driven growth agenda. The key thematic areas from the just transition to the green minerals to the food security, to the energy conversation as well. I think it was really great to see how African member states committed not only by words, but also there was a lot of money and investments that were coming in. And I think that's also a key outcome. It would be really amazing to see how these investments would turn out. I think also a highlight for me, with a little bit of bias as a youth advocate, is the African Youth Climate Assembly, which I was a part of. It was great for us. We had our own declaration. And the fact that I think even the fact that we're able to have the youth assembly was by itself an achievement because it showed that there was that room for young people to be part of the conversation. I think some of the key outcome of the fact that we had a lot of commitment from the African Development Bank to channel money for financing for youth and innovation, and they promised a lot of money. Where the Global Adaptation Fund, who also promised a lot of funds to trickle down to young people and support the innovations. Even during the assembly, we were able to have our own declaration about highlighting some of our key demands from skilling, from access to opportunities, from being systematically institutionalized in this process. Therefore, we ensure that our voices as young people are not lost, but they're actually incorporated and actually taken into account. Yeah, so I think the Nairobi Leaders Declaration, coupled with the African Youth Climate Assembly and its achievements, was some of the highlights of the ACS conference. I think from COP28, we saw a lot of amazing key outcomes. I think they dubbed it the UAE consensus, which I think was quite a good thing, but I mean, it was good enough. So some of the key highlights for me would be the conversation around the fossil fuel. I think at the global stock take, it was great to see the fact that they mentioned there will be a phase down from fossil fuel. I think it might not be what people had hoped and expected, but I think it is, a step in the right direction. There's some progress we're seeing, and world leaders are becoming increasingly aware of the fact that our pathway with fossil fuels will no longer be sustainable and is not safe for the environment, which is a critical thing. Other beautiful thing I liked about this COP28 was the fact that we were able to draw a lot of nexus conversations. Sometimes we feel like climate is a silo conversation. However, people different days were able to link climate to health, and we saw the climate health declaration, which was a key thing about what are the interlinkages between climate and health, and how do we make our healthcare systems more resilient, to handle the climate crisis. We had linkages with climate and food, talking about food sovereignty. How do we actually have sustainable agricultural practices that can actually last and build resilience, and we address food security. It was great to see, for me as a climate educator, the nexus between climate and education, which we saw on the Youth Day. People talking about the conversation on green skills and green jobs and how being able to equip young people for this green growth agenda, how are they better placed to do that as well. So for me, I love the aspect of even the linkage between climate and conflict. Look at what are those two concepts interlinking and how. So I think for me that made the climate conversation more real and more humanized. Therefore, because I think when you're able to draw some of those connection points, you're able to localize the conversation and really bring everybody on board, because everybody sometimes thinks that climate is some far-fetched conversation. But the moment you begin to kind of draw those linkages, you begin to see that, oh wow, this actually is something that's happening in our communities and we have a lot of stake to do. So I think that was quite amazing to see at COP28. I think now, I mean, just building off my last response, I think this is where now the challenge comes in as young people to see how do we localize the conversation, because these conversations at the global level at the COPs mean nothing if they're not able to trickle down to the people who are at the grassroots level and who are able to actually who are feeling the grunt and the impact of the climate crisis. Therefore, I believe, as young people, we have to be that linkage and we have to be that bridge, and we have to see those opportunities and those gaps to see how do we transfer the information down, to the young people. And I think some of the ways I mean, of course, advocacy works in terms of, holding sessions with people who didn't go to COP, unpacking them. I think I was able to attend 2, 3 sessions where I was able to unpack some of the key outcomes of COP and why it matters to young people and kind of break it down. Secondly, building off that is like, how do we break some of these language barriers? Like, the UN system is known for its jargons, right? So how do we make the system more understandable for young people, them to see, okay, yeah, this is where I can plug in as well. I think also for young people, for them to like pick an interest as well. No, because COP is such a broad thing, and there's so many issues being discussed from energy to gender to urbanization to water issues, right? So, questions the young people also must find their niche in this space as well to see how do they plug into the conversation. Whether it's from a policy lens or from an innovation lens or from an advocacy lens. I think there's so many pathways for young people to follow, and I think it first begins with them taking the time to read through some of the documents. I think the COP28 website is still available for someone to read through and go through and be like, okay, this is what happened at COP28. And for them to now see some of the commitments. Because I think once you have a commitment, it's easy to go and run to a stakeholder and a partner and be like, member states said they will do this. So, let's do it, and let's, go from there. And I think some of the outcome documents provide, the starting points for young people to have conversations, for young people to be innovative, for young people to, propose and localize now the conversation and contextualize it to now what's happening in their local communities. And I think, but again, as I said, it must begin with us taking the time to understand what happened at COP28 and why it's important for us. At the end of the day, one thing I've learned about the system is the fact that, money is important and people need resources to do anything, right? So I think for me, the innovative idea would be see how do we create a system that can allow money to actually trickle down to the most vulnerable and trickle down, in a transparent, accountable way. Because I think the problem in Africa is not the fact that we don't have the ideas or what know what to do. Sometimes it's a challenge of money and resources to actually get to where we're going to go. So I think we need to explore things like blended financing, which is like, looking at things like public, private, even philanthropic partnerships, right? How do we bring different stakeholders together to partner to reduce the burden and cost for some of these projects, Because I think for Africa, we need a lot of resources to actually actualize these large scale projects to reach the last mile, The last mile are those people who are the most vulnerable. And sometimes their projects are not very, they don't have great incentive, to want to do it, but we need to do it, right? So I think being able to find a mechanism to ensure that the financing model is sustainable for Africa, it is not leaving a debt, I think that's paramount because at the end of the day, all the ideas are there. We have a plan, we have the AU strategy, we have the ACS outcomes, we have the COP outcomes. However, money needs to be injected to actually spearhead and move our ambitions into reality. I think this is a beautiful question. I think it's very great because when you look at the African continent, young people are the future. We are the leaders now and for the future as well. Like by 2040, we'll be making, almost 60-70% of the population. This is people under the age of 35. And the question comes is how do you actually harness this youth power and youth creativity and tenacity, And given the fact that young people are not a homogeneous population, mean the fact that we have diverse skills to harness from and abilities, the key question comes saying what role and how do we, as young people, as other stakeholders, actually tap into this opportunity? And I think one of the key starting points is by investing in education, and investing in young people to actually skill up, to reskill, and to be better placed and capacitated to actually play their role. Because I feel like if people are not empowered with information to understand where they fit in the puzzle, it's very hard for them to be part of the picture, and it comes to come to us to kind of begin to break down some of this misconceptions around climate. For us to create these linkages between climate and other sectors of life. Therefore, they're able to understand, okay, why it matters to them and how they're going to play a role in it, going to play a role in the conversation. So me, I think for us, it takes a lot to invest in education, to reskill, to restructure our curriculum to allow us to be more adaptable, to learn about the world around us as well. And moving on from there on, it comes now to, I wouldn't just say, empowering young people. I would say you need to invest, which means we need to tangibly and purposefully put in the effort to invest in the young people, or not only in the education, but also in the ideas. Because if you look at the African continent, we have so many innovators who have come up with innovations, but all they are missing is a little bit of mentorship, a little bit of support to take the idea from, the startup stage to, the scale up stage. I think we have to be intentional about investing and actually harnessing this power that African youth possess. For me, having a little bit of experience in the climate space, I think what is really paramount right at this juncture is to see a lot less talk and a lot more action and a lot more commitment and a lot more money to trickle down. I think where we are right now, it's no longer people don't. I mean, we no longer have to say the climate crisis is real. I think we're all experiencing it across the world in different ways, from floods to, earthquakes to tsunamis and name it, heat waves or whatever it is. We're all feeling the brunt of it. So the problem is not the fact that people don't know about the climate crisis, the fact that now, how do we actually, turn all of that into, tangible actions? I think for me, it's to see member states actually, not committing, but demonstrating greater sense of urgency and that greater sense of action and responsibility, And I think for me, it would be great to see how some of this amazing policies, be operationalized. The loss of damage fund, we saw a lot of commitment come from COP28. It would be great to see a lot more resources come from that as well. We are looking out to see the new quantified goal conversations happening in Baku as well. What is this new quantified goal for financing? I mean, it's so good. Yeah, let's talk about the financing goal. But the bigger question is the fact that, okay, fine, where is this money coming from? I think that's always the piece that's missing as well. People say, yeah, we need money, we need resources, we need all these different things. But where is the money coming from? And how we ensure that this money that's coming is not gonna, further, increase the divide, and further the debt crisis as well. So I think that those are some of the key things as well. And of course, as a young person, I'd love to see more and more young people involved in the conversation, not only involved as an afterthought, but to be, at the negotiating table, to be the presenters, to be the innovators, to be the policymakers. I think if you're able to integrate young people who present, who are, the future and who are, kind of our hope, I think if they're able to integrate more young people in the ACS, in the COP29, I think that way we create that intergenerational collaboration. I think that having that diverse perspectives from generation to generation is really powerful. It helps us rethink and reshape how we view the climate conversation, not just in a very myopic way, but we need to think about it like what we're doing now will impact, my generation and the generation to come as well. And therefore, they must be at the table, which is the young people, which is children, and they need to be at the heart of the conversation as well. When it comes to immersing yourself and learning more about COP and about climate, I think there's a lot of different opportunities to harness. And I think it's first of all, it's about initiative for someone to be willing to put themselves out there. There's a couple of youth networks someone can join. We have Yango, which is the official UNFCCC youth constituency, which is a great place for someone to join. They have a lot of different working groups, so if someone can immerse themselves and just be in the system. I think one of the best ways to learn is through experiences and by being in the system as well. We also have the major group for youth and children to UNEP, which is a similar, thing to Yango, but now they are the official youth group to the UNEP, which is a UN environmental program. Again, another great place for someone to immerse themselves in the UNEP process as well. And also, I think there's so many sources out there. There's Coursera, there's so many SCG Academy that offer a lot of free courses. And I think if someone really, really, really wants to, in this day and age, I think even just typing on your computer or on your phone, climate change courses, there's so much free content out there that will at least give you the fundamental basics in terms of what it means, the system, some of the processes as well, and some of the avenues for, collaboration. I also think, young people should also look at and see how to attend different events and webinars and conferences out there as well. And that starts by following some of the pages, following the UN pages, following the UNHCR pages and the UNEP pages on social media as well, going on TikTok as well. I think there's so much information out there that if someone really wants to, grow their knowledge, it's just a matter of searching and searching, climate change, climate and energy, green minerals, and they can find a lot of resources as well. And of course, by immersing themselves, by attending events and conferences, again, they get to see these concepts come to life as well. For me, as a young person, I think what keeps me motivated in the system, which is hard at sometimes because sometimes you feel like what you do is so inconsequential, it's so small. However, I believe that these small actions have, such a great impact. I think what I've come to understand and kind of accept the fact that if we all play our part and if we all do our small actions, that amounts to something, and I think if we're able to leverage the power of collaboration and working together, I think that provides such a powerful moment for us as young people, to leverage each other's networks, to share experiences, to grow with each other. And I think that sense of feeling like you're not alone it really helps a lot. And I think apart from that, also, if you have a deep sense of passion about, and this deep resolve, I think nothing moves you and nothing, can shake you. It's almost like the late Professor Wangari Maathai. She had such a deep resolve in her that, Uhuru Park and our parks had to be protected at all cost. And that's why she was able to go to the streets with all women, and to camp there and even go for a hunger strike. I think that's what we must do at this rate. We must have that deep resolve that will move us to do unprecedented action. Therefore, because at this rate and the sense of urgency we have right now with the climate crisis, we need nothing less than that. So I think one must find their deep resolve and that they must find their why, like what are you fighting for? And is it worth it? Is it worthy enough for you to wake up every day and go knock those doors, even if they're gonna say no, and you keep on going every single day? I think that deep resolve is something that I'm building as a young person to understand that I have a part to play, and I'll keep going until we get where we need to get as a country, as a people, and as young people in general. For me, when I look at the climate conversation and try to understand like why African youth should care about the conversation, I think for me, one thing is clear: our future is at stake, and we as the young people who represent the biggest demographic in Africa, we must be at the forefront of the conversation, whether we like it or not. We have no choice because there's no one else who's gonna magically drop down and come and save us. I think when you come to that realization, it becomes a powerful resolve and a powerful drive to actually move forward. And secondly, also the fact that, when you understand the fact that our environment is like the bedrock, of development, it's the bedrock of our life, even our social life as well. It's you begin to realize that the climate conversation is bigger than just the trees and carbon emissions and whatnot. It's more about, it's about the climate and food nexus. If you're not able to tackle the climate crisis, it affects our food, and that's what we eat every day. We look at the climate and water nexus. If we're not able to protect our water resources and actually restore water systems, we won't have water, to sustain our day-to-day lives. And so much more. So I think for African youth, the moment they begin to, unpack this climate conversation and see how it interlinks with their lives, from education, to their social goals, to their economic goals as well, I think that, is able to, bring more young people on board, and they begin to see the fact that it's about me. I think now we must do that greater work of localizing and contextualizing this climate conversation, because that is where we're able to bring more young people in, and actually they see, okay, fine, we have to play our part. And I think for them, they should be incentivized because A, it's their future at stake, and secondly, the fact that they already have the capacity to do so. We have the potential to do so as well. It's a matter of seeing how do we channel this potential and this ideas, meaningfully and in a tangible way, and through our more stakeholder collaboration, investing in their ideas, bringing mentors, bringing the platforms as well for young people, for them to actually solve these challenges, because we are there already. We just need a little bit more support and sustainable and tangible investments to get there. We have to build our value as young people, right? I know I've always said we have potential, but we must translate our potential into value, right? And invest in ourselves and invest in our skilling as well. And we have to remain relentless. We have to fight for our space, and I think you have to continually, knock on the doors and continually budge and continually ask the tough questions and continually, be that accountability mechanism. I think for so long, we as young people will not be satisfied with the status quo, and we have to keep on challenging the status quo and say, why are we doing this way? Why not this way? Let's try this. Let's do that. And I think that's our voices. We need to utilize our voices, utilize, our social media platforms and so much more other tools to see how do we keep the system accountable, because member states have made so many commitments around young people, they've made so many agreements and whatnot. But however, we're not seeing that translate into action. So I think for us as young people, I'll urge all of us is to find that space for you to raise your voice and to find your niche as well. Therefore, you can actually play that role that you are destined to play. However, if you do not take that initiative, no one else will come and say, take it. So I think it must come from a deep resolve from within you to say, I, as a young person, have this opportune moment to play as a climate advocate, as a leader, as a policymaker, whatever it is, as a climate creative, as an artist, you have a role to play as well. So find your space, and there's so much room for all of us as African youth to thrive and to drive the conversation.